Weidner here. As you can see, I've got new digs because we got hit by a huge storm last night and knocked out all the power and the internet and everything where I am. So I'm kind of down close to downtown where I live. So you'll probably hear a lot of traffic and stuff. But this is Reality Check, and thanks for watching, and hit like and subscribe and all that other stuff. And we've got Jonny Enoch back. Jonny has a really good show on Gaia and called Mystery Teachings, and I'm here to say that you can watch it for free if you hit the link that's going to be provided below. We have several things that we've asked Gaia to let us show for free, and one of them is Mystery Teachings. The other one is Hollywood Decoded and a few other things. So those are free to you, for you to watch. And if you like it, maybe you'll subscribe to Gaia. If you subscribe to Gaia on that link, I get some money from that big corporation, and that's a good thing. So anyway, Jonny Enoch has this great show, and it's almost has run to its end. It's got another couple of weeks to go. And apparently it's a big hit from what I hear, Jonny.
Thanks, Jay. And I appreciate the support of all of you, because I think we're all interested in these subjects. We're all interested in the mysteries and solving them. And when we look at all the religions and esoteric traditions in the world, they all hold a piece of the puzzle.
Well, they do. And today we're going to talk about, people in the West, they go off searching for shamans and wise people out in the third world, and that's great. I did the same thing, and took the ayahuasca in Peru and all of that, and I really appreciate all those traditions. But what people in the West don't realize is that we actually have a shamanic tradition in our own culture, and it doesn't go by the name of shamanism, but it goes by the name of alchemy, Rosicrucianism, Hermeticism, and these are schools of thought that are delicious because they combine the Western quest for science with mysticism. And the two are very volatile when they get mixed together and create some pretty interesting throw-offs. And I think that's what we're going to talk about today.
I completely agree with you. And when we look at all of our ancient religions, or even the religions that we see today, a lot of them have just been recycled from the ancient Vedas, the holy books in India. And those all, I would say, came from our prehistoric civilizations, like those that we would call the Atlanteans. But for example, there's so much going on all around us in that respect. When we look at our current influences that we've had, in our sciences and the discoveries we're having in theoretical physics, those have all come from yesterday's esotericism. When you look at the concept of dimensions, you look at the concept of multiverses, or even a Big Bang concept or expansion theory, we could say, okay, is this similar to what the Kabbalistic tree of life talks about? And where did the Kabbalistic tree of life come from? Blavatsky tells us that the tree of life and the Jewish menorah, or the candelabrum, came from the ancient tree rites of India. And so there's all kinds of interesting stuff. And people, when we look at, let's say, our religions again, let's say Christianity, Judaism, Islam, all of these things have notes that we find from the Egyptian, from the Hindu, from Jainism, going back into Buddhism, and all these teachings again and again. Well, the same is for our secret societies in the mystery school traditions, as you know. When we look at the concept of masonry is really just a remarketing and repackaging in its symbolism and everything that you'd find of the ancient artificers, or what the priestcraft had in ancient Egypt. And the same is true of the Rosicrucians, right?
Yeah, it's all, it most likely the strain came through India first, I would say. And then the first city state. So this would be mostly rural at this stage, or small villages and things. But then they created the city state in Babylon. And then later, of course, in Egypt, they created the city state. And that's where you got the real growth of this school of thought, because now people could, they didn't have to farm. They could sit and talk to each other and compare notes and practice, because they were living in cities, which, cities aren't good for you, but they do allow you to do other things besides just farm, which is, you have to grow food. So yeah, so when the stream of thought came down from India into Babylon and in Egypt, and we know that there were, settlements 12,000 years ago in the same area. So this stream of thought has been going on for literally hundreds of thousands of years, I'm really beginning to conclude.
Absolutely. Manly P. Hall taught exactly what the great German professor Max Muller believed, that when we see the spread of civilization of the mysteries, we see it come down into northern India in the Indo-Gangetic plains, which became India with a mixing with the Proto-Dravidian people, and then went down through Asia Minor, and the mysteries were deposited into Egypt. And of course, we know that there were ancient civilizations on this earth. My personal belief on it is they went back millions of years ago, and we've seen so many various cycles, with folks having to go into subterranean complexes and the earth going through various shifts. But, when we see these influences that have been passed down through the ages, we can't deny that when you go across in the 17th century, if you go into Europe, one group that we know had these ancient mystical connections and roots that had all kinds of influences on our academics and scholars and, the thinkers of the day, were this group called the Invisible College, connected over to the Rosicrucians. And, a lot of people will say, okay, this Invisible College was just a group of thinkers and intellectuals, but I think that it means exactly what it says. This is an invisible college. It's much more than that when you get into the mystical teachings.
Yeah, and what you have to make a leap of faith almost here, in that you and I have both encountered these special people, I guess you would call them, who seem to have these very special abilities to read minds, and maybe even to have objects that move back and forth through space and time, and just very odd people. They don't seem to age. They seem to have a glowing light around them. And I've had my own encounter one time, and maybe more than one time, but one time I was at a coffee shop, and an older guy, I was maybe 35 at the time, and an older guy sat down, just started talking to me. He was very elegant. He drank his cup, like that. And he had a kind of a funny accent, and I wasn't sure who he was. But then later, when I was talking to Whitley Strieber, turns out that he had the same encounter with, I think, the same guy in Toronto, like around the same time, maybe a couple of years later. He had his own encounter with this guy. When he told me about it and described him, I was like, wow, that's exactly the description that the guy I saw. And the guy was very matter of fact about telling me all sorts of incredible things. It only lasted about an hour, and he got up and left. I never saw him again. And the entire experience was like I was in a dream. And if I had my faculties about me, I would have been writing everything down and asking him who he was and everything. But as soon as he sat down, I went into this kind of weird dream state where he just kind of fed me this information and just kind of calmly talked to me. And then he got up and left. And it was about 10 minutes after he left when I kind of came back to reality and realized I just had an encounter. And then, of course, you ask yourself, well, why did I have the encounter? What was the point of it? And I think it was to let me know that these people who I had been searching for, by the way, I had gone to France and the Pyrenees. I probably spent 8 weeks driving around the Pyrenees trying to find the secret location of this invisible college. My book, the books that I had been reading, told me that it was in the Pyrenees and it was a medieval castle. And of course, this was long before the Harry Potter stuff came out. And then when I didn't read the Harry Potter books, but when I saw the movie, the first movie that came out, it was exactly the story of one of Fulcanelli's students going to the Pyrenees and going to this secret castle. He actually met with these people that lived there. They dress in medieval clothing and they practice alchemy, and they're very old and aged. And they, the way it was described to me is that they stay hidden, but they manifest into our minds mostly through dream states to induce ideas into us, to cause society to change for the better. But they have to do it on a spiritual level. They can't do it on the physical level. That's the thing.
Absolutely. And I think there's a movie that out there that really covers this. If you want to see a movie that really portrays this the most, accurately I've seen, is that movie Doctor Strange. If you watch that movie, it's very similar to this concept when we talk about the real invisible college. They've been called by all sorts of different names: Manly P. Hall, Helena Blavatsky, Guy Ballard, a lot of them, Alice Bailey. A lot of the theosophists would refer to them as the Great White Lodge or the Great White Brotherhood. And it had nothing to do with their ethnicity. There's a yes,
the white light that emanates from them.
Exactly. And Manly P. Hall said, even if one human soul finds the door to enter this group, to find them every 100 years, this is a wonderful thing. Their whole purpose is for the redemption of humanity. And they're sort of the caretakers looking out for us on another level. But,
Definitely.
Absolutely. We get clues about them, that there's a group like this that are behind the mystery schools or behind the secret societies that have these tremendous abilities. And we get a lot of clues. For example, if you go outside of the Amoric headquarters, let's say over in California, you see a great statue of Tutmos III. And Tutmos III, he was a priestly king of the 18th dynasty. And of course, he's a very important figure in Freemasonry, in the Rosicrucianism. He had the name Stargate in his name. When you look at even his cartouche, Mem Kefun Ra, or even the other titles he has, that he's the master of the Ka. And, so did Hatshepsut. They were both very, very interesting masters of the mysteries during their time. And so what's interesting about that is outside of the Rosicrucian headquarters there, they refer to him as their immortal deputy grand master. Basically, he's still running the show. And with him, you see that this is somebody who had these teachings of alchemy, the Egyptian mysteries. Well, that's all Rosicrucianism is. If you look at the Ankh, which is the key of life, essentially there's two ways you can look at it. As you could look at it as a sun rising on the horizon. You could look at it as, you're going into like a uterus, or there's a phallus, it's being impregnated, there's a womb. Well, in the Rosy Cross, we have all sorts of alchemical keys here. And it's like, if you know what to look for with these keys, they're letting you know that, hey, that there is a system here you can tap into, just like the Cross of Hendai has encoded messages.
Yeah, and in my book on the Cross of Hendai, I do have the Ankh and the Tree of Life overlying the Ankh. So the Ankh is also the Kabbalah or the Jewish Tree of Life, which isn't necessarily even a Jewish tradition, because the Ankh proves that the Tree of Life was in Egypt long before the Hebrews had it. So all throughout, once you understand how to read the symbols, you can see that these symbols are found in India, they're found in Babylon, they're found in Egypt, and they're actually found in Lebanon too, near Baalbek. So to be honest with you, they're all actually found on Native American iconography, on pictograms, on rocks and things even. So there's this kind of universal, Manly P. Hall points it out, the Book of the Hopi, with the cross. And so we can see that there was very likely a worldwide civilization a long, long time ago that we would call Atlantis. It wasn't just one locality, it was everywhere, and it was spread everywhere. And there's a lot of really exciting evidence coming out right now to show that the earth itself may have been terraformed by these magicians, creating tapestries of magnetic particles and trees as antennas. And there's a lot of really amazing esoteric work that's coming out right now that shows that the earth itself may be the result of this invisible college. I know that sounds crazy.
Yeah, there's a lot that we can look at there. I know a lot of people out there have heard of the immortal Saint Germain. In fact, when Zsuzsanna and I were on your show, we were talking about how he could have been connected to Ferenc Rákóczi II in Hungary. You know, we get this idea of him being connected to Sir Francis Bacon. But here's another guy that we believe was an immortal. And, you know, when we look at this book, for example, this is the most holy Trinisophia of the Comte de Saint Germain, or La Très Sainte Trinisophie in French. But you know what's really interesting? If any of you want to look this up, you can go to chapter 5. If you go to chapter 5 in this edition I have here that's translated by Manly P. Hall, it says here, the velocity with which we sped through space can be compared with naught but itself. In an instant, I had lost sight of the plains below. The earth seemed to me only a vague cloud. I had been lifted to a tremendous height. For quite a long time, I rolled through space. I saw globes revolve around me and earths gravitate at my feet. And you know, Jay, in the 17th century, around 1600 CE, we get this idea with Kepler. He wrote this fantasy story, you know, about wearing protective suits and what it was like going through space with a free fall. And you got to wonder, with these guys, like a guy like Kepler, his breakthroughs he was giving with celestial mechanics and everything, that he had this firsthand look, sure sounds like he's describing space flight pretty accurately. We got to ask ourselves, were guys like Saint Germain, were guys like this that were in touch with the mystery schools or invisible colleges, were they either in touch with extraterrestrials, or were they highly advanced at, you know, going anywhere they want, you know, in space time? Or what do you think is going on there?
Well, I think the invisible college is connected to the group I call the crypto-terrestrials. This would be a group that survived the catastrophe somehow and is still somewhere on this earth, highly advanced, high technology, space travel, the whole thing. And they're hiding from us, but they're also nudging us and pushing us in directions. And I believe the Invisible College is highly connected with this group. I don't think they're necessarily extraterrestrials. They could be, I don't know. But I also believe that the Invisible College people have, both men and the women, have the ability to astral travel like we wish we had. In other words, they can go pretty much anywhere they want and see and have total recall of what they saw. And, you know, so, you know, a guy like Emanuel Swedenborg, who probably was not in the Invisible College, but knew people in the Invisible College who taught him the things that he knew. He, of course, went out into these realms just like Kepler and Count Saint Germain, and even Carl Jung did it when he died. He had a near-death experience in which he went up into these realms. So even in modern day, it happens. And so, yeah, this is one of the things with the Invisible College is they get to go to these realms and learn all these things that, you know, we have to die practically to get to these other realms or become really good at astral travel.
Absolutely. And that's what we're going to evolve to. So we don't need spaceships or anything like that. The extraterrestrials that are coming here, even if you see a small UFO, a lot of those are just like organic craft that, are almost living beings themselves, which is very interesting. But inside of those UFOs, I find it very interesting is that you could see a little craft on the outside and it's basically enormous on the inside, like you're going into a huge stadium. And that's due to transdimensional mathematics and all these kind of spooky things in our universe. But what's interesting about that, about these folks overlooking us and seeing our progress, most certainly we hear about something called transitioning to the plane of Charon. And, it's almost like even in the Babylonian traditions and those areas, we see that there is this plane between planes, and it's operating at the same time as us and on top of us at a different resonance or a different frequency. And, we get a lot of examples of that through the mysteries. There is a book that came out in 1930, and I believe it's called In Search of Secret Egypt. It's by Paul Brunton. And I think you and I have discussed this before, but if any of you watching have never checked this out, look at this story. It's really interesting. We go back to that old story of Napoleon when he visited Egypt, and, he wanted to find out for himself that if, what it was like to be up in the Great Pyramid. Well, he goes and spends the night in the Great Pyramid, and he comes out the next day white as a ghost. He had seen his Waterloo. And the interesting thing about that is, he never talked about it till the end of his life on his deathbed, but this guy named Paul Brunton wanted to find out. And so he went up into the king's chamber of the Great Pyramid, and he laid there with a candlelight flickering. And he started to become very scared after a while because these shadowy figures were showing up, and he thought they were ghosts or something. And all of a sudden he saw these priests that show up, and they take him down into these chambers, and he sees that there's an ancient hall of records, that there is this Egypt that's happening at the same time as the other Egypt. It's almost like a multi-dimensional Egypt. And, the Egyptians have a lot of writing about this, of these two lands. And they also talk about, you have a Ba, a Ka, and an Ak, and they show you going through essentially like a portal to get in and out of these places. So I do think that that's connected to what we call the invisible college.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. In fact, I think that when Nicholas Roerich went to Tibet to find Shambhala, and he was disappointed that he didn't find it, but he said near the end of his life that Shambhala is not a place underground. It's a place above the ground, and it truly exists, but it's invisible to us.
Absolutely. These places exist on the earth. There's entrances to them. If you go up into Peru, the area of like Amaru Maru, there's that little keyhole area that you see in the side of the rock that looks like a doorway, Shambhala. And most certainly there's an area. It's funny that the guy that wrote that Transylvanian Sunrise books series, Radu Sinamar, he wrote them with Peter Moon. He said in his latest book, he actually goes and gives the coordinates, basically, so you can find where he was basically shown where this was. And so, whether you have to have the right DNA activation or the ability to enter, these folks clearly are here and they're working with us. You told me something interesting. You had related this to the 7 spheres.
Yeah. So in deep esoteric alchemy, the earth is it has 7 concentric, like rings of an onion, going out from the center, from the surface of the earth, going upwards. This is why monasteries and temples are always high up in mountains. They're trying to get closer to these spheres. And so they say that the very first sphere, the one that's closest to the earth, is the one where when you die or when you astral travel there, that's where you kind of find out that it would be low-level spiritual people will go there and find out all the mistakes that they made. But if you can get to the 7th level, after you die or in astral travel, that you've actually got a really good shot at getting out of here completely and going to even higher realms. So that's what it is. You're working your way up these 7 levels, but there's also 7 levels down too. So there actually is repercussions for bad behavior. You don't go down there forever, but you go down into the hot gravity under the earth. Your soul does, your Akh, and it goes down into the hot gravity. And the Egyptians talk about this all the time. They don't shirk about it. They say, yeah, no, if you're heavier than a feather, guess where you go? And so that the whole point was, of course, to be lighter than a feather, your soul, which means you don't do a lot of things that cause heaviness to your soul during this life, so that you can ascend to these realms that the Egyptians apparently were freely traveling, by the way. If you start reading the hieroglyphs, it's like it was common nature in Egypt to be able to do all this stuff. And somehow it's atrophied in us, or we've lost the ability, or our DNA got screwed up or something. I don't know what.
Absolutely. We see it depicted all over the place. And they had these false doors to the netters, these stargates sort of places. But, to start getting clues, we see how clever it is that the ancient masters on this planet have left breadcrumbs for us. And just how masonry was repackaged, that we see, in the story of masonry, you see Hiram Abiff, the widow's son. You see Solomon, which is the Sol Om On, SOL, the Latin for the light, Om, the Hindu for the light, and On, the Egyptian for the light. And that's why we turn the lights on, and neon is the new light, of course. Well, that story is so interesting, because the resurrection process that they go through in their initiation rites, it's just like the Egyptians with Osiris, or you go back into the Phrygians with Attis, and all those sort of things. In Rosicrucianism, we have this idea of Friedrich Christian Rosenkreuz, or that's just Christian of the Rosy Cross, as you know, who, as you have pointed out, is also the one that's credited for that monument, the Georgia Guidestones. And it's interesting. You see the connection with him is so interesting, because we get the story of this freighter from the 14th century, and he has this interesting writing that's very alchemical, with all sorts of initiation rites. The the Chemical Wedding of Christian Rosenkreuz from 1459, and there's these
bizarre books ever written
there. Right?
One of the most bizarre books ever written, for sure. Yes. I mean, it's like if Salvador Dali wrote a book, it would be The Alchemical Wedding of Christian Rosenkreuz. I mean, it's that weird.
Yeah, and the one thing that the Rosicrucians also really get at too is the robes of righteousness. So we get at this idea that of your soul. If you want to start talking about the Ba, the Ka, and the Akh, and there are these very interesting keys of how to start, realizing this more than human form. Now, whether it's tapping into plasma and all these sort of things, there's this interesting idea that they call it the bridal chamber of Christ. And if you go into the apocryphal book of Thomas, there's this one passageway that few will stand at the door, but not many will enter, sort of idea, right? And with this is that there's this almost this alluding to the fact that there's a door, or there's a key, there's a way of entering this, but we first of all have to find this ability within ourselves to regenerate or awaken our abilities.
Yeah, that's you have to be initiated, and that's the thing that we've lost. Even the Freemasons are not really teaching initiatory rites anymore. So I don't even know where you would go anymore to learn these rites. Do you have any idea?
Well, first of all, you got to watch Reality Check. But secondly, there are groups out there that teach esoteric teachings, and you have metaphysics, and there are Rosicrucian type of learning places. But when you look at the keys that the Rosicrucians have, they look, let's say, at the Christian symbolism, which was great for preserving what they had in their day. You know, if you look in Revelations in the Bible, the book of the Apocalypse, well, that's filled with pagan symbolism. It's got, you know, Vedic astrology of Seta, the great whale. You have the story of Atlantis in there. They say that the book of Revelation was written by John of Patmos out in the Aegean Sea. Well, the big secret with that is that the book of Revelation is probably the most ancient and oldest book in the Bible. It was never once a Christian book. It was thrown out dozens of times. All the church fathers opposed it, and it came from the Phrygians that lived on the island of Patmos, and they served a god called Ion, the god of the air and electricity. Well, the I and the J in the Latin are interchangeable. You just throw a squiggly line on it, it becomes the Anglo-Saxon John of Patmos. Well, the same is true with the Rosicrucians. As we were discussing, if you look at their cross, you know, you have it's just like the Christian cross that had the INRI, Jesus of Nazareth, King of Jews. You know, this is sort of the cover story on the one's a religious sense to preserve the teachings. But there, if you open up the Hebrew and we start looking into Latin, we have these elemental keys. We have the elements broken up into how we tap into these higher states and higher forms. Have you ever talked about or looked into Azoth?
No, go ahead, tell us.
Well, Azoth, when we look at this sort of other elemental key, is sort of like if you want to look at the ether or spirit. And I know you've talked a lot about plasma, and I think that's the connection that you're looking at there, right?
Yeah, that's what ion is. It's the plasma. So, and by the way, the book of Revelation is at least 500 years earlier than it's now attributed. So,
absolutely. The one big secret is that the New Testament is far older than the Old Testament. A lot of those books that you see in there, you know, that they come in, like Manly P. Hall said in the book of John, the universal mind was just replaced with Jesus. And I'm not saying that there wasn't a historical Jesus, because I believe there was a historical Jesus. I believe his name was Yeshua ben Pantera, but you'll have to watch the next episode of Mystery Teachings to find out about that. But the idea is that these very ancient teachings, as you know, and concepts of the solar mysteries were personified into him. And there's great keys in there for those with eyes to see. But, you know, these folks have been helping us all along, just like the influence we're getting today, which is very disproportionate, that we're getting help in different groups around the world from extraterrestrials and other more advanced life forms. They are, you know, helping us in many ways, just as the Germans had help, and just as the Americas had help, you know, in that period of the 1940s or the 1950s, you know, where we had certain crashes like the Roswell crash, or even when I believe is very apparent that even China is getting help from groups. You know, Jay, if we go back into the 1300s, you had these black ships that were coming out of China. And these black ships that were coming out of China, if people do their research on this, these are very interesting. Some of these were the size of the Titanic. And they would go around, and one ship might have all water on it. One ship might have all livestock and can produce food. One might have soldiers and various things. These were going all over the place and conquering certain areas and exploring. Well, this is one of these ideas is that the Medici banking family had met with these folks. And this is where some of the great secrets came with glass. Like when we look at the Venetian glassmakers, they had the secrets of how to make mirrors. Well, we had certain help at certain times through advanced groups. And as you and I have discussed, these could be Atlantean missionaries that at certain times that were, what did you call them? Crypto ETs?
Crypto-terrestrials, secret earthlings.
Yeah, crypto-terrestrials. I like it. So I thought maybe you were.
And this is who helped in Fingerprints of the Gods. This is who
Right.
he's writing about. These are the crypto-terrestrials that got on these really big boats and they came to America and India and Europe and Africa, and they taught everybody how to farm again, how to read and write, and how to have respect for women. And they have these certain principles, and they're in every single place. They have the memory of that. And then Hancock shows that really well.
Absolutely. I mean, here's the thing. I thought when you were saying crypto-terrestrials, I thought you meant maybe that they were here and then they left the planet and came back. I mean, that could be the case also. But absolutely, this is seen all over the ancient world, just what you described, you know, even to the ancient peoples. When we go back into Babylonia and all those sort of places, you hear about Dagon, which, you know, we also refer to as Nimrod, Oannes, or Sidon. That here's a guy that comes to their shores, to these very primitive people that don't even know how to make fire. And we're told he was a very good man, but he helped them and instructed them in what they needed to do to get back on track. And we're told he wore this fish hat or a mitre that the Pope wears to this day. And of course, you know the story of Quetzalcoatl and Cuculcan. That's the interesting thing about the Cortez story, which is also very sad that you find in the records. I think today they're in Madrid, in the codices. We find that when he came to these people on their shores, they bowed to him and thought he was the return of their god, because here he has this white beard, and he also had a cross, which seems to be a very ancient symbol. You know, the cross is the most ancient of symbols for the light. And that's also a very interesting key, that the light, the astral light, seems to be one of the most ancient tie-ins to all these different groups of unlocking the door.
Also, I just want to add that the same thing happened in Hawaii. They thought it was the return of the gods when Captain Cook arrived. And the same thing is true in South America with Pizarro. They thought that the gods had come back. And both Cortez and Pizarro and Cook were able to use this as, you know, weaponize it to conquer these people, because that's how 600 guys conquered Mexico. I mean, frankly, it was not because they were good at war, and they were ruthless, but they had this psychological thing that the people thought that they were the gods, and so they let down their their arm and got hit really hard. So that in itself is very strange. Why are these people all thinking that these people are gods? You know, and what does that mean? I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, look at the story in ancient Greece we get of the theogony of Hesiod. Here's Hesiod, this goat herder who can't even read or write. He's minding his own business, and all of a sudden these muses, they come up to him and approach him. And by the way, this is where we get the word amusement, museum, musing. These folks are where we get it from. And they come up to him and they say, hey, you know what? You are just one of many countless Earth-like planets with inhabitants on it. And the ruler of your Earth is Jupiter, and or Zeus, the ruler of Cassiopeia. And they actually tell him, you know, where the gods stay out in space, and that you could drop an anvil off the balcony, and it will land in the exact coordinates, and this is how far it is, and all that kind of stuff. You know, and also look at guys like Pythagoras of Samos. There's guys that have been incredibly brilliant on this earth, that have had incredible instruction and shown things to sort of enlighten people, and they defy all explanation. And I think that those are sort of an inadvertent, you know, background way of helping us from this invisible college.
Yeah, I think the same thing with Akhenaten, and, you know, walking down the Nile and seeing a flying saucer, and then telling him to redo the religion of Egypt, and Muhammad going illiterate, you know, 17-year-old going into a cave and supposedly meeting the angel Gabriel, who gives him the download of the entire, you know, the holy book of Islam. And you know, you got to wonder, I mean, you know, really? And over we see this influence of angelic intervention. There's big religions in Indonesia, the Subuds, which is a huge religion in Indonesia. Again, Subud was walking down the street and at 2 a.m, and all of a sudden he saw a light above him, and it hit him in his third eye, and he thought he'd almost died, fell to the ground, woke up, and he had an entire religion in his head. So where's that coming from? And I believe it's coming from these guys. They're slowly changing and doing things to us. And we know the same thing with Crick and Watson on a scientific level. They had been wrestling for years to try to figure out the shape of the DNA. And then Crick went to bed late at night and had a fitful dream in which he saw this helical shape going into a keyhole and turning. Right. And it was like, and he woke up and he had it. He drew it out, and then he ran over to Watson and said, here it is. And then they realized that they finally had it. So there's something funny going on, is what I'm saying, in a good way.
Absolutely. The other thing is that one of the greatest secrets to the mysteries that I don't think people talk about, and I think is very much the key here, is if you need a certain kind of DNA to be able to enter the bridal chamber of Christ, so to speak, as they talk about in the book of Thomas.
Yep.
Let's look at the Ankh, or let's look over at the Rosy Cross. Okay, yep. So we see that if the rose, which is also the influx of the Holy Spirit, which has a very feminine side to it. If you look at the Holy Spirit, it's the Shekinah. And that's a feminine aspect, if you want to see this. And when you're doing that, there's a sort of dew that we're told. Now, whether that's niter in alchemy or the chemical transmutations of these things, some might look at that as the white powder of gold, or they might look at this as like impregnating itself or regenerating. One of the most interesting secrets of the ancient world is when you see that there's the two serpents facing away from each other, or you see that there's the two eagle heads facing away from each other, which are also the phoenixes. And people might ask, why is that so important, and what does it mean? Well, the month that we're just about to turn into right now, January, our friend Julius Caesar that gave us the Julian calendar, hence why July is named after him, as Julian, and August comes from Augustus, as you know. Well, January comes from Janus, and Janus is not only the keeper of the keys, but this is an ancient two-headed god with two heads, one that faces this way, one that faces that way. And what's really interesting about that is that even Helena Petrovna Blavatsky says in her original works that Lemuria, which the ancient name for it, according to the Theosophists, was Shamali, that in Lemuria that there was these giants, and we could see they had these two heads, and they were very strange. And I guess you could say these might have been some of the groups that were here a very long time ago. And getting into giants is a whole other topic. But this teaching we find in the Genesis version, that the rabbinical Jewish version called the Midrash of Genesis, does not say that we came from a rib. It said that there were these two-headed giants with two heads, one faces this way, one that faces this way, and there was both sexes in the same body, and they were later on split in half by the Elohim geneticists. They split them down the back and split up the sexes. Before that, the Elohim told Adam, it was the Adamic race, told him to go and replenish yourself, regenerate yourself. This is just like the scarab, which has that hermaphrodite aspect. This is why the Knights Templars had the Baphomet with the features of male and female. It was never meant to be anything bad when it was originally illustrated. The Baphomet was illustrated, or the goat of Mendes, in the works of Eliphas Levi. This was a nature god, and this principle of being able to regenerate oneself comes into this again, because you see over with Akhenaten, who you just talked about. Akhenaten, he really was really like this god in Egypt called Hapi. If you guys look this up, Hapi, H-A-P-P-I. Now, Hapi is an androgynous god, and he was taking the waters of the Nile, which was impregnated by Osiris, by the way, who's our resurrection guy. That's where we draw all the alchemical materials from, in the Nile, by the way. Happy was an androgynous god that had male and female features. That's the depiction you see on the star card of the tarot in the major arcana, which is Aquarius. You see the depiction of Happy. Well, that's who Akhenaten really wanted to look like, because he was an initiate also of the mysteries. So when you see this idea of the depictions of Akhenaten, let's say at the Cairo Museum, you'll notice that he's got the universal features of every man on earth. He also has the sort of breasts and the hips of a woman, but he's got a much different depiction when you see him over and in the Berlin Museum. You see his bust. So essentially, the idea is in this universal quality of the androgynous nature of spirit, there was an idea that we could transform ourselves or regenerate ourselves into another type of body. And I believe this is, again, the key to the mysteries.
Yeah, at Nantes Cathedral, there's a statue of an old man on one side and a young woman on the other side. And, so it really, in alchemy, they talk about how you become the other sex in your next life. So it's man, woman, man, woman, man, woman, man, woman, like that. And you're to learn certain qualities when you're a man, so that when you become a woman, your spiritual qualities are retained. You don't lose those memories. That's one of the keys. But also, I think that they're actually transmuting into bodies. I think they have the ability to switch into another body without dying. I mean.
Oh, absolutely. There is this. There's a concept that you could do the transpositioning of consciousness, and within this work, we're not saying that this is the teaching here is for people who are going back and forth between the sexes. Essentially, within this teaching, this is the uniting of those forces. It's like when you see the caduceus on the side of an ambulance, and you see that there are these two serpents going up the Kundalini awakening. On each side that comes up at the top, you see the two swan wings. This is the sides of the equilibrium. And then it opens up into the pineal. And so this balance of both sides is part of this regeneration of opening that up. What would you say is the greatest key to the alchemist's life? Like, what is the preparation that they must go through to get to that point where they can actually, use the philosopher's stone?
Well, you can't have any, you have to be like a completely static. You can't be ruffled by anything that's going on. Very stoic attitude about everything, and you can't do anything wrong. I mean, you can't do anything wrong. You have to live this like really pure life. Then the work begins. So it's not until you've achieved that you can even start the work. So, and the work will fail if you haven't achieved that, by the way. So the alchemist will tell you, you're not ready, go home, come back in 10 years. Right. And they know instantly that you're not ready. They just don't have the mental balance. It is true. It's a balance between the male and the female within each of us that they're trying to achieve. No doubt about it.
Absolutely. And we also talk about the great work and the weaving of the golden wedding garment, that some folks are going to have a pale red color, or even if you talk about seeing people's energy, that or you talk about karma, which is the law of cause and effect, or dharma, which directs us in the right directions. There's many different aspects to this. So the idea, though, is that there's an invisible group that can be tapped into. Now, whether you want to talk about that as astral projection, I've actually talked to a lot of people that have out-of-body experiences and astral projections where they've gone all of a sudden into a place where there was great masters or ascended masters, if you will, or places that they could find doorways to that were already there that they could get instructed. I was talking to someone recently who has incredible abilities, that they have abilities that I can't even explain or put into words. You know, when it comes to being able to read your mind, to be able to see things and know things that are going to happen. And they told me that there are schools on this planet that exist, that even some of the folks that belong to the royal households of the world have gone through similar types of training, that these schools have existed in India and other places for a long time on our planet, with masters that could be hundreds of years old. You know, that's what they were told. They weren't sure how old they were. And they thought maybe at the very least, some of them were 140 to 150 years old, but have intense and rigorous training with the mind, within emptying the mind, within using meditation. And, you know, one example I was given is that how much we don't realize how tremendously powerful all of us are, is that if you're faced with a problem in your life, you know, anything you might be going through right now, one thing that you can see your tremendous abilities of your psyche is that you can write down those things on a piece of paper before you go to bed or wherever you might be, leave it there, come back to it in a few hours or come back to it the next morning, and you'd be surprised with the harmonic forces in the universe, as well as your subconscious, that there's another area that you'll tap into that will have the solutions flood into your mind, that you'll know where to go with this. There's so much more that we can do, that we are superhumans. And I think that that's what the mystery teachings are all about, is giving us a trail of breadcrumbs of helping us to remember our true inheritance, who we are and where we're going.
Absolutely. Very well said. And another thing that you can do is ask. I mean, they'll contact you if you ask. If you're really asking in a sincere way, you will get contacted. It may be on the astral plane or in the dream world. It doesn't matter. It's still real. And I think that it's just really important to understand that we do have help. We do have helpers, and that they want to help us, but frequently we ignore them. And we need to stop doing that. And I think that's a really good place to end the show, actually. And really want to appreciate you. I really appreciate you coming on, Jonny. You always have so many interesting things to say. And again, Jonny has a show on Gaia, Mystery Teachings, and we're going to provide a link below, so you guys can go watch that. If you're not a member of Gaia, you can watch it for free. If you like it, join. I think you can join Gaia for pretty cheap. There's a bunch of plans. So find the cheapest plan if you don't have any money, and support Jonny. And because I would like Gaia to do more shows like your show, Jonny. That's why I want your show to be a big hit. That's why I had you on 3 times in the last, 6 weeks or whatever, because I really want to give as much push to the show as possible. That's why I'm providing the link now, so that people can watch you without spending a dime. And it's just, we want to encourage Gaia to have more programs like this. I think you agree.
Thanks so much for having me on the show. I always enjoy being here on Reality Check. And yeah, I love shows that can make us think, that also get us asking more questions on where we can find the rest of the puzzle pieces. So thanks again, Jay.
Hey, thanks, Jonny. I'm Jay Weidner. This is Reality Check. And please hit subscribe and like and the bell and all that. And I will be back with more amazing guests. Thanks for watching.